Hello everyone. In this next video I'm going to talk about research and world building, two very important aspects in writing, especially science fiction and fantasy. So I brought you this book's over here. One is about the Black Death from Philip Ziegler. The other is The Birth of the Cell by Henry Harris, and this other one, The 30 Years' War. These three books are perhaps not as interesting as reading a science fiction novel for you, but this is what differentiates a fiction writer, from uh, perhaps the average um, the average science fiction reader, and that's because in order for me, for a writer to write about my craft, I need to be based upon realism. So for me, it's equally important to read not only fiction but also non-fiction. History is one of the most important sources for for research in my aspect. Science plays also an important part, but most of the science I've learned has been from from college, from work. Of course, I also like to, as a hobbyist, I like to garden a lot and involve myself in ecological projects. So um, all of these things affect the way you build your world. So research is very important because, nowadays there's a pervasiveness in technology that affects the reading habits in general for all of us. Um, you have social media, you have movies, you have video games. I do all that, but I also spend a lot of time doing research by reading. There are several polls I've researched over the years, and there's a general tendency from people in Asia and Europe to spend more time reading. That's what they say. I cannot account for that. That could be true. They also say that younger people, and those living in urban areas tend to read more books per year. You also have exceptions, other exceptions such as writers. They have to read a lot, and CEOs, for example. I read that an average CEO reads about 50 books per year. That's quite a lot. Um, why is it important to read when you have all of these other types of media? Well, reading helps a writer develop his imagination, but also improves the writing craft overall. Why is that? If I if I read this book, for example, I mean, it would be easier to watch a Hollywood movie or play, a video game. But when you read this, you have to train your mind. You have to do a great effort to try to imagine how life was in the 17th century. The same goes for science fiction. I mean, you need to try and think about the worlds that the author has built. The aircraft, the spacecraft, the buildings, the architecture, the armor, for example. Okay, so that's very important. Um, it also helps you with your grammar. It helps you write. You know, it helps you with your wordsmithing, as they say. So it's very important for a writer. I mean, it's very important for all of us to read, for those who can, but especially for writers. There's another thing. In order to make time to read in this busy, busy times that we live in, you need to think in an orderly and strategic fashion. You need to make you need to have a schedule, and you need to also diverse. not depend only on books. I mean, history books. You can read comic books if you are burned out from reading this type of books, which are very heavy, heavy lifting, I think. Um, Also, you can change to a scientific paper like I do, or to a history book back, or you just can keep reading novels. But it's different. It's very important that you diversify your reading repertoire, and also the format. I mean, if you're going mobile, if you travel a lot, then an ebook format is very comfortable. If you stay more at home, for example, then normal books, conventional ones are obviously the best choice. Um, Reading and researching creates a three-dimensional image of your original idea. It helps with what I call mind mapping. Mind mapping, there are softwares for that. So it's akin to brainstorming. You start from one point, and then from that point you make connections with other things. For example, Green Legion, or yeah, Green Legion, history, uh, environmental science, theology, astronomy. Um, you you keep building this network of topics, and from there you can begin doing research in a very structured way. You can have to read this and that of history, theology, or whatever it is that you need to research on. Now we are moving towards world building. Um what is world building? World building is the creation of a medium through which you can tell a story. World building involves, characters, setting, locations, that setting, sorry, technology, um, history. There are many other aspects. The thing with world building is that the degree of world building varies from one genre to another. It's not the same amount of world building that you do in science fiction, in historical fiction or romantic, than in science fiction. I mean, especially hardcore science fiction or high fantasy like Tolkien. I mean, that involves a lot of details. I mean, a lot of you need to know a lot about the characters, and you keep building from that because that character has a history. Has to come from somewhere, and that somewhere. I mean, the armor that he wears that depicts somehow his culture, whether he lives in the mountains or in the grassland or in the forest. His behavior, his culture in overall will be different. Um, it's very important about world building is to create a cohesive world, to create the illusion that you are almost God. I mean, you're not God, but I mean, you need to play sort of like God because you have to know everything about your world, and you have to uh, tell about that world in pieces to your audience so that they don't become overwhelmed. So it's important that you know your stuff, that you be cohesive in what you say, what you write. There's another thing: world building never ends. I mean, you can keep writing about a specific planet and its ecology, or a specific spaceship and how it works, and where did it come from, and what materials it was made of. All that takes time, and it actually never ends, as I say. So, but one of the important things is to create this cohesiveness in your world so that your reader may feel safe and may float, so to speak, in that world, and may want to, may be willing to stay there longer um than expected, hopefully. Um, very important. There's a writer called Ben Bova who wrote about world building. He says that craftsmanship and this capacity to incite a sense of wonder in your readers are the two most important aspects in world building. So if you achieve both, then you're on the good track. Um, it's important to become organized. How you deal with your world building. I always think about world building as writing an encyclopedia before you write your actual novel, or at the same time, parallel to it. So that's one of the thing about writing this in this genre. You are practically always writing two books. You're writing your novel, and parallel to that, um, you need to upgrade, keep upgrading your encyclopedia. That involves characters, technology, etc. So I would like to say that word building would be equal to inspiration times life experience times research. These three important factors determine. This is an equation that I built. I didn't get it from any book, so correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I've learned from experience. I mean, you need a lot of inspiration. What inspires me? Music, for example. I love Beethoven. It's one of my favorite composers. So, Beethoven, inspiration. Or back there, I have my grandfather's paintings. So, I draw inspiration from that, from the landscape, from forests, from mountains, whatever it is that inspires you. Life experience, my work experience, my life in general, everything. Somehow, I somehow pour it into my writing. Then research. I can't stress enough. Read, please. Read. Stop watching social media or playing so many video games. Start researching and do it structurally with these mind mapping techniques that I explain upon in the written part. That would be op 4 research and word build. That's on my webpage if you want to read further. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a great evening. Bye bye.